Okay. So, guys, this is module 2, and we are moving to uh, the most interesting part, I would say, as far as I'm concerned, which is called world building. You know, there are some very important things on the mindset level that need to be taken into account if you want to develop the IP that has a chance. And there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of a lot of different people use. Let me put it this way: uh, there is no consistent vocabulary on world building, IP development, and this leads to a lot of misunderstanding and misconceptions and mistakes ultimately, because there is a difference between, and we'll talk about it today, there is a difference between storytelling, world building, and commercial IP development, right? And different people may use this or that term, meaning something that only they know what they mean, right? And so, one of the things that we want to do today is to kind of get to agreement about the vocabulary, like what we call what. So, in the practical dimension, because it's like it's not that it's something unique when people say, like, it's important that you build the immersive world, if you develop, especially if you develop a game. So it's kind of commonplace, like you don't surprise anyone if you say that that worlds are great, like immersive, believable worlds. Um, but then again, people go like, yeah, 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 and everyone continues to do their own thing, right? So I was looking for a way to kind of show on data that focusing on fictional world is beneficial strategically. Of course, if you are in position of trying to develop something that lasts commercially and culturally, right? If you are in the pure art business, right, then it's a little bit different story. It's a little bit more emotional, situational, and very dependent on the artist, right? So um, everything that we'll be talking about is as if your plan is to build something lasting for a couple of decades at least, and something that can span different platforms. right? In games and beyond games, PC, console, video streaming, movies, comics, books, things of that nature, and be profitable in that situation. And so I was trying to figure out how you can uh, bring some rational argument about the importance of fictional world in the entertainment product, let's say, right? Which is, in our case, a video game. And then I noticed that, there is such rating aggregator, which is called Metacritic, right? And pretty much everyone in games and in movies knows what Metacritic is. It's a rating aggregator which aggregates different aggregates and calculates the average rating. Maybe not average, that's not correct. They have, I guess, some different weights for different sources. But anyways, they aggregate reviews from multiple media outlets that write reviews about movies, games, and then they calculate the Metacritic rating. And you may think that, like, who cares, right? But the thing is that they're doing something right, because first of all, like, if you want a simple explanation, it is common knowledge that very often the bonuses of executive management, like C-level management in big entertainment companies, is tied to average Metacritic rating of the product they're working with, right? And you may say that, like, those corporate people are just stupid, but that's, not here, not in this case, because the other thing that you will notice, if you are seriously involved in game development, is that when you, and we will cover all those things later down the road in our program. So there's a number of things you do when you develop a game or any entertainment product for that matter, or any product, I would say, for that matter. So from the product management standpoint, product management and marketing standpoint, so meaning that product management and marketing in this example focuses on figuring out whom are we building for? Are we still building this? Meaning that, there's a lot of situations when, well, the most common situation is that people don't really care whom they building for, right? And that's kind of, everyone says that you need to figure out the market and then find out, by market we mean target audience, right? Who specifically are you building for, right? Your game, your movie, your comic book, whatever, your smartphone. And understanding your target segment kind of empowers you to be a little bit more confident, right, about what exactly are you doing in this uncertainty of product development and marketing, especially in entertainment, because, like, product development, like any development, is super complicated, because you need to figure out what people want without having, like it's not like the uh, someone specifically asked you to do something, right? So you need to figure out it on your own, like what what would be right thing to do for this specific target audience, right? And so there's a number of things that you do while you develop this, let's say, video game. Let's stick to video games. And you constantly track and update your knowledge about this target segment that you chose, right? And but by target segment, we mean like not something like console players, right, or mobile gamers. It's something more specific, at least genre specific, right? So like competitive first person shooter fans, or uh, story rich RPG fans, right? Or strategic economy simulation fans. Things like that, something that you can imagine that it could be a real person with this specific interests, right? And so you track that, and then you also track what's going on from the development standpoint. And there's a number of tools for that. We'll talk about it later. And you do that to make sure that you are on track, basically, right? Because it is very common that even if you started to do something, which is very rare for very specific target audience, because normally people just start developing based on the idea they had this morning, which is okay. Like it's inevitable, but as soon as you get to understanding, even if you started with because it's really normal and in human nature, right, to have an idea and then start to do something about it. But as soon as you understand who could be the potential player, gamer, or the game that you envisioned, right, the better will be for you, because you will then keep track of what's going on, like what this, you will do certain exercises like qualitative and quantitative research, and then you will have certain tools to see what's going on in terms of like the backlog, the features that the development team develops, and also communications, community building, and all that. And so you will do things to make sure, like your main goal will be basically, to put it short, to know or try to know before the game is launched what the perception will be, right? And when you do that, when you use all those tools that we'll be talking about later, you will have pretty good idea. Like on any stage of development, you will be able to tell that, like, this is 6.5 out of 10 right now. And we will need this much time to get it to, I don't know, 8.5. Because that's like what everyone wants, right? Like everyone wants 12 out of 10, but 8.5 is very, very, very good. And we'll talk about it later. So when you develop a game, you do all those measurements and all those, all that stuff to figure out how good you are in what you do, like how it shapes up, right? How things are going with the product, and do you have any chances on launch date to meet the audience expectations, investors expectations, your own expectations, and stuff like that. So when you do that, you surprisingly see that all your findings, because you start to understand your game, then because your game is nested in the category, like games like this game, or maybe you have a market leader. Let's say there's Diablo, right, and then there are action RPGs, and so you are kind of nested into some category, and you start to understand this category, and knowing what you know about your product, you start to understand why this or that game in the category did well or not, right? And this makes you then realize that this metascore, which is average or whatever, like it's not right, it's not average, like this aggregated rating on Metacritic, in most of the times is very, very, very accurate, right? And it's amazing because it's supposed to be based on game reviews, right? And those game reviews are written by journalists. And what the fuck journalists know about games, right? I mean, like, of course, they're gamers and all of that, but we used to think that it's super subjective opinion of a given journalist, right? Which kind of becomes this what's the word for that? Well, basically rating, right? And but then it appears that you realize that this thing actually makes a lot of sense, right? And all those, like the differences between 6 and 7, 7 and 8 out of 10, right? Or 60, 70, 80, 40. Well, 40 doesn't matter. Anyways, like anything below 60 doesn't matter. But again, not today. So you start to understand that this is really, really interesting and valuable source of valuation. And the good news is that it exists for a very long time, right? And so, and you can look in retrospect what was happening, because they have all types of filters to their rating system, like by platform, by obviously by time frame. And then there's very interesting rating on Metacritic, which is called top 100 games of all time and all platforms, right? So it's like greatest of all time, the best of the best of the best, right? So the ones that made the most cultural impact. And normally this will be represented as also a commercial success. So like it's very rare occasion that the game is high on Metacritic, let's say, right, and didn't do very well commercially. So you start paying attention you're starting to pay attention to Metacritic, right? And so I did that. That happened to me also, like whatever, like 10 years ago, something. And I looked at this rating, which is called Metacritic Top 100 of all time and all platforms. And I tried to see what's going on there, right? So like, because I'm, besides being very much involved in video games, I'm also a very passionate movie fan, right? So I guess I have like more than 2,000 movies in watched list, not watch list, not to watch, but already watched, right? So I have a list on IMDb, and I add movies and TV series that I watched, and it's like a little bit more than 2,000 titles, and many of them I watched like way more than I should. I mean, like 20 times, 30 times, things of that nature. So you can imagine like how many hours is that. And so looking at, because IMDb is kind of also one of the important rating systems, but it's kind of movie only. They tried to do something about games, but it never worked out for them. But as far as movies, IMDb is very serious also rating system, right? And it normally corresponds to kind of Metascore, which is also interesting, right? I mean, if you're not interested in conspiracy theories like that, everything is owned by a single person who does everything, right? So, but again, if you listen to what I said before, there's a lot of sense in what's going on with those ratings, right? So they're mostly true. And even if one outlet will deviate and do something, I don't know, give a low grade or higher than average grade, the Metascore kind of makes things right? So where I was, yeah. So spending time on IMDb, I noticed that over the years they have IMDb top 250, right? Very famous rating. And what happens with IMDb top 250 is evolution, right? It changes over time. So, for example, you would notice, I mean, like when new things pop up, and you need to understand that movie industry is in the same situation as game. I would say that games are in the same situation as movie industry, right? Because games industry right now in situation where movies were in 70s, but again, I mean, like a lot of things about sequels and kind of exploiting existing titles and lack of innovation and all that. That's very common thing, both in games and in movies. And we're kind of in an interesting situation because we are like, I mean, we here in Vision Masters, we're interested in developing new IPs, but also in a way that will make them long lasting, right? So it's a balance, right? So you want a new IP, but you also want it to be like Marvel because that's the right approach, and also audience kind of loves it if you do it right, because if people love something, they want more of it, unless they see that you just exploit it and do some bullshit. Yeah, but that's a different story, right? So anyways, even though that like there are dominant franchises in movies, every couple of years at least something happens and new names, new titles, I would say, show up in IMDb top 250. So, and it's interesting, and they can get to top 10, no problem. Like, current top 100 of top 250 is pretty recent, right? I mean, like, historically speaking, it's 2000s, right? It's not Casablanca or Citizen Kane or Breakfast at Tiffany's or things like that. I mean, some of them are also on 250, but the upper part of the rating is pretty recent. I mean, like 10, 15 years. And some are absolutely new. So, and I thought, that's interesting. Let's see what's going on with Metacritic top 100 games of all time. And what you see in that rating is basically that the changes would be it's like new developments of the same franchise keep getting into that rating. Like, so you will see like 10 Final Fantasies, 20 Super Mario titles, right? Several Elder Scrolls titles, several God of War titles. And so it's like franchises kind of updating themselves in that list, right? And I thought, yeah, well, that's interesting. And then I thought, okay, now, so those of you who spend some time with games, at least like in any capacity, not necessarily as a game developer or like professionally, but also as a gamer, you would notice that, let's say, mobile and indie games were kind of, what to say, like trendy, right? Or attracted a lot of attention. Let's put it that way. Yeah, well, mobile went absolutely crazy for, you know, different reasons. Yeah, right now it's like normally, well, it's people are not settled in terms here. What because as we all know, mobile games are not games, but anyways, mobile games. One guy called them phone games. I think that's an amazing title for this category. So phone games are things in itself, but anyways, they have a lot of investment, a lot of people working there. They pretend that they're games, that they're part of the games industry, and you would think that, and it happens for what, for 15 years, something like that, right? Like mostly 10, but you can tell that starting from, let's say, iPhone 4, because before that it was some, I don't know, very different situation. But at least 10 years is all about mobile. Like in every newspaper, in every news channel, if something is game related, especially if people are not very much involved, if it's like mainstream media or something like that, everyone is like mobile, and all that. You're like, okay. And then indie, with the help of Steam, for Steam it was a strategy, right? They did it on purpose. They started to kind of incentivize indie game development, right, for their own reasons. and they're not cruel. I mean, like it's not bad reasons, but you need to understand that like big players can play big games, and those big games may result in you know uh, industrial or even cultural trends, right? So thanks to Gabe and thanks to Steam, uh, and that again started like 10, 15 years ago. We have this movement of indie developers, and by indie developers I mean like it's also kind of uh, discussion. People tend to think that indie is uh, like indie studio would be the studio that is not owned by the major company, right? That's not necessarily uh, right way to think about it, because I believe that, anyways, it doesn't matter. I mean, like it's not for today's conversation. So like we have both mobile and indie as a very hyped up areas. And when you see when you look at Metacritic top 100 of all time and all platforms, which is important, you would find like 5 indie games, like Disco Elysium and all that. Uh, and you will find 0 mobile games, which is interesting. Uh, and I thought, like, yeah, well, maybe it's a, kind of conspiracy of game journalists, but that doesn't make sense because they would love indie games, right? They may not like mobile games, but everyone kind of loves indies, tries to support them where possible, give them advances, and so I thought, like, yeah, what could be the reason for that? And I believe now that the reason for that is that mobile games and indie games are obsessed with mechanics, right? If you think about it, you will see that I'm most probably right. Uh, Especially when you have something to compare, right? When you have this top 100 games of all time, all platforms in front of you, and you start to kind of, tr- when you try to remember what happened in mobile and indie scene for the last 10 years, you will see that like it's all mechanic based type of stuff, right? Sometimes storytelling for indies. And there's zero world building. So no one came up with a universe, let's say, where people would love to spend time, right? And those majors from so-called AAA studios with their AAA franchises, they are doing exactly that. They're developing and expanding and scaling fictional worlds, right? And so that's something like that's a lengthy intro to the topic. So what I was trying to say is that, and to show you, is that there are like rational and objective ways to see that immersive world is good for your business. Okay. Now, let me very quickly share the slides because we will need a couple of slides today. Yeah, like this. All right, so world building, our topic today. And this is where we are. Like this is our program. As we discussed the previous time, right? So we have basically 15 things to cover, right? And today we're covering the first thing because like the previous one was kind of introduction to the whole program. So it was kind of zero, and today is second session, but it's like first thing to cover. And the first thing to cover is universe design. And by universe design, we mean that your universe that you are designing, like your fictional world, has, or should have rather, architecture and setting. And you need to figure that out before you do anything else, right? And yeah, this is something that I was trying to explain previously, right? So there is a difference, right, between fictional world and mechanic based or meme based or funny character based or cool story based entertainment, right? And by fictional world and let's say something that people also call IP, right? Without really explaining what they mean, because IP is intellectual property, and you know, like your anything can be intellectual property, right? I mean, like not necessarily game, not necessarily right. No, like the specific character may be intellectual property, your logo may be intellectual property, the patent for I know for this microphone is also intellectual property. So IP doesn't have this self-explanatory power. Like people who know what they're talking about, they know what this means, but what it really means, it's a commercial entertainment product designed as a believable living world with the intention to become a cross-media franchise. That basically what IP means, right? So it's not a artwork, right? Pure art. It's a commercial entertainment product, which means that it's made for someone specifically with intention to kind of generate interest and profit. It is designed as a believable living world, so something where people may behave as if it's real, right? At least in certain situations, like at home in front of their computer. And the third part is that it has it is designed with intention to become cross-media or cross-platform franchise, right? Like The Witcher, let's say, or Avengers or Star Wars, things like that. And here on this slide, I specifically used the pictures of, let's say, first products in the franchise, right? So it's like first Iron Man, first Star Wars that hit them. It's number 4, but it's the first in release chronology. First Alien, first Fallout, and first Witcher, right? Because right now, when you see it, when you look at Iron Man or Star Wars or Alien or any of those, you have the perception of this immense franchise that stands behind that, right? But at the time when they were released first, they were just another product, but they were done right. And on the right, you have like all common misunderstandings, right? What people think, like what people do, when they think that they are developing the IP, right? It could be a mechanic-based thing. It could be basically a funny or meme-based or satirical thing, like a joke, but very complicated and interactive, right? It could be a memorable character, or it could be a story-based thing, right? And this is all good. I mean, like, right, because they could be super successful, but also they have the limitation, right? Because normally, when you do something like mechanic or character, I mean, like character and nothing else, and story based, what you have to do, even if this thing kind of worked, normally you will find yourself in a situation where uh, you need to, like, if you want to continue, you need to do something new, right? Because, like, these things, they don't have this capacity for scaling, right? And on the contrary, the IP or this fictional world is designed in a way that it has this scaling potential. And you may, it's way easier. And how it works, it all works from the fan base, right? So if there's a number of people, like a good number of people, like a few million people who are loyal fans of your product, right, then it's way easier to give them something within this existing world than say like, hey, you remember I did that shooter about like cats, right? So now I'm making the RPG, whatever, about hedgehogs, and they will be like, yeah, okay, maybe you're a good game developer. Maybe I will check this out, right? And if you have the fictional world, then it works way easier because people are already immersed. They can, even if they don't admit it, right? I mean, like, there's a number of people who are openly kind of associate themselves with your product, but the majority of people are like, kind of silent fan base, let's say, right? Because you spend a lot of time with your product. They get used to visuals. They kind of spend, like, I don't know, several hundred hours looking at the same character, which is, by the way, branded image, right? And so they have all psychological and aesthetic prerequisites to kind of be easily converted into the next iteration of the same thing. All right. Yeah. And so moving to world building, so there are, two big mistakes that people do when they approach world building. First mistake is that people often associate world building with storytelling and writing. And that's wrong. This is not the case, and it's absolutely wrong. And they are not the same. So, storytelling and writing and world building are different things. It's Their relations are like front end and back end. Okay. And it's a key, let's say, mindset challenge that people need to solve before they can even start to develop IPs, right? Because, like, previous time, in the previous module, we had this slide, right, about the differences between real world and fictional world's business. And the important point there was that the core value, the reason people pay you, is very different in real world's business and fictional world's business. And, like, in real world's business, the people pay you for basically a thing, right, a stock holding unit. And in the fictional world's in fictional world's business, people pay you for the believable fictional world experience, right? And if you jump to storytelling And for example, let's say, like, the easiest example would be that you developed uh, the best story ever, but it's based in, let's say, in real world, right? In, yeah, in our reality. Uh, this means that you kind of developed the story. That's okay, but you completely skipped the world building, and now you have a story which is nested into the world that is not yours, right? Leaving aside all those things that, like the reality kills the fiction and sense of, fantasy, and all that. Even on this level of analysis, you kind of uh, skipped the fundamentals and jumped into picking up the paint color for the walls, right? Which is nice and important, but it needs to be done at a certain time, and there's some order of things, right, that need to be done to build something that makes sense and lasts long, right? So storytelling happens after world building as a, kind of digitalization of everything that you designed for your universe, right? And then there is a second mistake. The second mistake for when people approach, let's say, IP development and world building is that they misunderstand it with choosing the setting, and basically making it complicated. And you would, a lot of times you will hear something like, yeah, hey, well, we have whatever, like fantasy or dark fantasy, sci-fi, whatever, or, animal-like world. And people say that like they, and that's it, right? There's nothing there unless there's someone on the team who's crazy and obsessed with, again, storytelling, and will try to tell you all the lore that they made up. But that's not the point, right? So when you misunderstand world building for setting, right? And for say, like, okay, I will have fantasy, but it will be super special, right? I will have high fantasy without elves for some reason, right? Because I'm super special, uh, and that will be the feature, right, of our world. That's not, again, how it works, right? That's kind of the opposite of how it works. But we'll get back to it on module 3 when we'll talk about setting. Because before you choose the setting and start figuring out lore and stories and, all that, and going deep into characters and locations and whatever, like magical artifacts or like special places, in story arcs, in storylines, you need to clearly define the architecture of your universe, of your fictional world. You may think about it like you need to design the, if you were to build the amusement park, you first need to design the layout of the whole thing. And only after that you can start building attractions, and picking up the colors for the hot dog booth or whatever, right? And design for the entrance tickets, right? So there's some order of steps that you need to take, right? And so let's see how the universe architecture looks like, because we kind of spent some time talking about how it shouldn't look like, right? So this is how overall universe architecture looks like. You see, uh, it consists of like two important parts, and you should look at it from left to right, at least the upper part of this model. First architecture, then setting, and then you go to this one is, let me change it really quick. There's a found a mistake. Okay. So you go architecture, setting, then genre, and then cross-media potential, right? So it's left to right and then down. And today, I'm trying to think, should we go deep? Because what we need to talk about is the architecture part, which is highlighted with green. And I'm pretty sure that if I start diving in, it will take another hour, and we are already kind of 1 hour in. So, anyways, it's a live stream. Whoever wants will listen, and then it will be a recording, and you can listen it whenever you want. So yeah, your universe architecture looks like that. You have, think of it as like a left hemisphere and right hemisphere of the brain, somebody's brain. Like imagine that this is a person, right? And left hemisphere is architecture because it's rational and kind of logical, right? And right hemisphere is setting because it's, let's say, aesthetical and not necessarily rational. It should be consistent, but it's it doesn't have to be, it's more in the on the side of like creativity. It's clearly on the side of creativity in its common understanding. Okay, and architecture is more like architecture. It's like like how does this work, right? And so having solved those two, you can then go to picking the genre, and after you figure that out, you can go and embed the cross-media potential into your universe, and that's kind of the framework how it works on a very, very high level of abstraction, right? So you design the architecture, like the dynamics, what's going on in this universe. Then you choose setting. An important thing is that you do it before. And again, it's like we mentioned already, that everyone knows that, let's say in marketing or in product management, you first need to define the target market and then start developing something. But people normally start developing something and then start kind of figuring out who now can buy this, let's say. And here you will have normally the same situation where people will be they will already have the setting in mind, because they are, I don't know, from early childhood they were fans of cyberpunk or sci-fi or fantasy or alternative history or whatever, and always wanted to do something like that. That's okay. You can kind of do it in the uh, uh, you can start from there, but you still need to go through all the steps. And when you go through all the steps, sometimes you will see that the choice of setting is a, it should be conscious or strategic choice, right? Because setting is something that helps your architecture to work in the best way. Let's say, but we'll get there. Like the setting is a separate. It's next module. We'll talk about it, right? Okay. Now architecture. Architecture consists of 5 steps, right? Or 5 things that you need to consider. It's as you can see on slide, is unit of action, type of interaction, place of interaction, pressure, and believability. What does it mean? It means that you literally need to remove everything that is not mechanical in your universe, if you understand what I'm saying. So like you need to get to the place where you're talking systems, right? So speaking of let's have an example, right? So let's take Game of Thrones, let's say, right? Yeah, if you ask anyone what Game of Thrones is, it's like normally you will have the answer like, yeah, that's fantasy or dark fantasy or political military fantasy or whatever. But that's not that. It's kind of setting. And what Game of Thrones really is a system where George Martin took basic human motivations like valor, greed, lust, very, very, very basic. I mean, like almost like deadly sins and, the whatever is the opposite of the deadly sins. And kind of refine them to the point where they are very singular. Like, so if someone is brave in Game of Thrones, they are brave like crazy. If someone is greedy, they will do anything, right? So they are very kind of saturated, or like 12 out of 10 with that motivation. And then what else he kind of added different variations of the same motivation, right? So you could be brave and selfish, you could be brave and courageous, and you could be greedy and murderous, or you could be just greedy because money for the sake of money, and things like that. So it's a kind of a you can literally put it into the spreadsheet, right? So you would have the basic motivations and variations of those basic motivations. So that's what is called unit of action, right? So it's like what is it's basically what is the subject, right, of this universe? What is what is the subject? What is the moving, like the building block, right? Or no, not the building block, the moving. Yeah, I'm trying to come up with the better term, that unit of action, but that's not necessarily possible, right? So it's something like again, let's use another example. In the football match, the unit of action will be a football player, right? In chess match, the unit of action will be the move, I guess. Yeah. So people usually mix unit of action with, let's say, characters, right? And that's not exactly that, right? Because what, again, getting back to Game of Thrones, they units of action in Game of Thrones, they will work absolutely fine if they would not have any names, right? They are self evidently obvious human motivations. You can literally call characters of Game of Thrones not by names but by those motivations. You know, like the brave guy or like the pretty girl or things like that. And so that's something that is basically takes part in the in the dynamic. It's like the you know, like the basic detail of your mechanism of your universe, right? Then when you figured out the unit of let's say let's give another example. Let's say let's take what we want. Let's take altered carbon, right? Cyberpunk universe. Uh, in altered carbon, the unit of action will be the memory stack, the thing that contains the human psyche, and the sleeve, which is the body in which the memory stack is inserted, right? And basically, those are units of action of uh, altered carbon because, again, it doesn't matter what are the names of the characters because anyone can virtually be anyone else, right? If you change the stack from one sleeve to another, it's the same sleeve but with different psyche, right? With like different personality inside. And like the whole dynamic of the altered carbon universe, at least if we're talking about like even yeah, let's talk about the first season. Let's say it's all about stacks changing places in different sleeves and sleeves being destroyed and stacks being copied and re-sleeved into different sleeves. And so it's like this dance of, you know, so the, let's say the main actors, right, of this universe are memory stacks and sleeves, which are like the bodies, right? And then they have names and some histories, but that's already storytelling, right? So the thing that makes you keeps you involved and grabs your attention is this play of stacks changing sleeves, basically, right? And what can happen if you put the male stack into the female sleeve? What will happen if Ortega will take her grandma's stack and put it into the sleeve of a violent criminal, right, to get her to the family dinner? And what will happen to Takeshi after whatever 300 years without the sleeve, let's say, right, and then being resleeved again, and so the main, like the unit of action, units, let's say, of action are stacks and sleeves in Altered Carbon. The same way in Game of Thrones, the units of action are like visualized basic motivations of humans, right? Like greed, honor, bravery, and things like that, right? So then, when you figure that out for your world that you are trying to build, you need to define what types of interactions between those units of actions will be will be happening in your world, right? So the thing here is that you may say like, yeah, whatever may happen, but that's true for the real world. But we're talking about fictional world, and in real world, interactions between entities could be very, very complex and very, very what different, right? So, for example, if you take interaction between one human and the other human, it will be like millions of types of interactions that may happen between them. It could be like, uh, uh, let's say, conversation. It could be kind of memories about each other. It could be a fight. It could be suspicion. It could be sexual encounter. It could be relations between like generations, like father, daughter, mother. You get the point. Like parent, child, grandparent, grandchild, all that like lineage thing. So there are numerous ways of in which, let's say, humans in real life or any object in real life may interact with the other object, even if you pick only two objects, right? And so in fictional world, you can't do that because first of all, it's impossible, and second of all, it's not needed. People don't want you to, well, they don't expect, right? For you, maybe someone will think that it could be fun, but people don't expect you to replicate the real life, right? What they want is a simplification, and simplification is like, think of it as a like TV show, right? So you may have all different units of action, right? But the type of interaction that is kind of allowed in your world is only this, or maybe two things, right? So people can fight and dance, right? And that's the way how they interact, right? So they either fighting or dancing, and everything else. They don't talk. They don't kind of they don't interact in any other way in your world. I mean, it's not prohibited, but like it's not priority, right? So you will focus on very, very maybe one or two types of interactions, right? Again, getting back to let's say Game of Thrones, the type of interactions, there will be two major types of maybe three types of interactions. It's a fight, it's betrayal in any form, and fight in any form, betrayal, and personal, normally most often sexual relationship, right? And so you have units of action that are basic motivations, and then the rules of like the types of interactions between them are limited to basically three things. They either fight or betray. You can choose another word. It's like, but that's okay for now. They either fight or betray or kind of have sex with each other, and that's it. Like in all, you know, endless variability of possible interaction, there are three most important types, right? So for example, again, or maybe not for example, so you might have, again, uh, things that, in your universe, meaningful interaction, right? Because you can always have dialogues of NPCs, and whatever. So that's not prohibited, but meaningful interactions. And by meaningful interactions, we mean interactions that kind of change something, or uh, something of importance, or uh, most importantly, interactions that lead to player engagement in what's going on, right? Uh, those are the types of interactions that need to be limited to very little number. It's very important to have it like below three, right? Unless there's a very very good reason to make more, because sometimes you can come up with the system where you will have more than three, but that's kind of the outlier, right? So you figure out your units of action, and then you come up with types of interaction between those units of action. And that's how, like, so the brief description could be like, we have, I don't know, the units of action are balls and squares, and the type of interaction between them is uh, rock paper scissors match, where you need to win 2 out of 3. And you can immediately understand and imagine, like, if you say someone, if you tell someone that, like, hey, this is the world where it's the world of squares and balls, and the only thing they do is they play rock paper scissors, and whoever wins 2 out of 3 kind of gets what they want. And and you can see, let's say, immediately you can see the skeleton of this potential. It's a dramatic simplification, right? But again, just for the sake of like delivering the point of that, right? And again, getting back to George Martin, it's the world or universe where you have very clear representations of human motivations that either fight or betray each other or have sex with each other. And you're like, I can see where it can go if I go on with development of this universe, right? So, which brings us to a third point, which is called place of interaction. And so when you have a unit of action and they interact, those units of action interact with each other, that needs to happen somewhere. Again, in real world, it may happen anywhere you want. In fictional world, you need to narrow it down. It should be, like you can play football anywhere you want, but the football that matters happens on the football stadium, right? So you need to define what would be the places where meaningful interactions between units of action happen. Is it a special place, right? Like Thunderdome in Mad Max. Is it the, let's say, Night City? Is it? It could be, like it could be places as localized as like a couple of rooms, but that's not a good material for a scalable universe. and as broad as like different star systems, right? So depending on what is defined as the unit of action, what are the actors, right? So for example, if you have units of action as some types of very specific humans, that's one story. But if you have like super duper godlike entities like in Dragon Ball Z, then your place of interaction can be like a star system, you know, or even a galaxy, right? Because like the interaction between these enormous entities could be happening in a place like, you know, the center of the galaxy, because in your world the center of every galaxy has a f- flat place, you know, with good acoustic, where very powerful beings can, you know, kind of interact with each other, right? So you need to figure out, based on who you defined as unit of action and what type of interactions, because if they're fighting, then there's, you know, it's a limitation towards, or at least maybe not limitation, but it informs you on where the fighting will make sense or where it will be interesting, if it, even if it doesn't make sense, right? But anyway, it's a kind of it's a constraint in a good way, right? So you have, let's say, elephants who fight with each other, and then you kind of try to imagine if the elephants who constantly fight with each other, where it will uh, make the most sense, and also keep, again, audience, because you're not doing it for yourself, in where, which places of interaction I should choose, right? So that it will keep the audience engaged and wanting to see, like, again and again, those interactions. And in the case of a video game, you know, it's basically they also need to enact those interactions through their characters, right? And so when you figured the unit of action, the type of interaction, and define the place or places of interaction, and also there's one point we said that so the variability may or may not be involved in defining the place of interaction, right? So what I'm trying to say is that you can go as narrow as like it's all happening only in one place. You know, like, remember the, what was the movie? Like pretty much any fighting movie from the 80s and 90s will be, you know, first 10 minutes they will show you the background of the characters, and then 1 hour and a half you will they will show you the same place, which is some kind of ring, right, or octagon or whatever, and it is normally some kind of a secret of, or very important place where the fights happen, right? So that's the, right, the units of action are not characters, but different styles of martial arts. Those will be the units of action in the fighting movie, right? Type of interaction will be obviously fighting. That's why you won't see a lot of love stories in fighting movies, only just, you know, for giggles. And the place of interaction, given the fact that this is a, you know, martial arts styles clashing in the fight, then obviously the place of interaction is something resembling the, you know, the boxing ring or the octagon or whatever, like the place where people fight. And then depending, and it can go as narrow as like the same place where all the participants meet each other to fight, or it can be as diverse as, let's say, at least in one of the Mortal Kombats, where they kind of had fights everywhere, like but in a very, like it was either picturesque or meaningful place, right? And it was not like they were fighting all over the place, right? It was a very specific place where the fighters will meet and fight with each other, and to that place they would need to have some kind of a commute, right? So they can't go out of the room and fight in the corridor. They will need to make it to this very special place and have a fight there. So you kind of get the point, right? And for example, you take Doctor Who, right? For Doctor Who, places of interaction are kind of like, sometimes there are several places in one episode, right, of the TV show. But at least one place for one episode, right? So it could be different. I mean, like, depending again on what units of action you chose, what type of interaction you chose, then the place of interaction will be kind of also additionally constrained by the previous two, right? Or again, constrained in a good way, right? Not like that you are narrowing down the options, kind of removing the options from your arsenal, but it kind of informs you more and more, like when you understand the unit of action, you understand the type of interaction, it's a deeper understanding of what will work better, right? And then you kind of use that to use the place of interaction. Then when you did that, you need something that is called pressure on the system, right? Because if you tell somebody, like, that, okay, let's again get back to George Martin and Game of Thrones. Okay, you have basic human motivations. They fight, betray, or kind of sleep with each other. And they do it in how do you call it? In dramatic, atmospheric places. And that would be the right way to describe it. It's because it's the castle, or like dramatic rock, or the field in front of the capital city, or desert, or these buildings made from ice, so it's somewhat dramatic and emotionally charged place, right? And then somebody may tell you, like, yeah, okay, but I've seen it once, I've seen it twice, why should I see, like, watch 8 episodes or whatever, or read like 10 books or something like that. And in order to, because there's no answer to that question, you can't, like, if someone asks you, like, why would I watch it or play it again and again and again, if you need to answer that, you can't answer to that question by coming up with some words to explain it. But what you can do, you can put pressure on the system, right? And in case of Game of Thrones, this pressure on the system was inevitable, life-stopping, cataclysmic event, which in our modern terms is called zombie apocalypse, right? And So this pressure on the system, it was equally unavoidable for any character in this universe, right? It doesn't matter. You are the richest person in the world. You are the strongest. You have the biggest army. You have the fleet, or whatever, right? The the when you put the pressure on the system, it has to be something that is unavoidable for any participant, like any unit of action, right, in your universe. And it needs to be something that happens no matter what, and no one can do anything about it, right? And that, because by that, you will create the dynamic of either, like the shrinking map, like in Battle Royale, and your units of action will have to interact, more and more frequently because of this imaginary, like, map is shrinking and shrinking and shrinking, and they get closer and closer and closer together, and there's more and more and more and more uh, interactions, or it could be something that it doesn't necessarily need to be something that will kill everyone, right? Even though it's cool. It could be something that, I don't know, resets the rules every once in a while, right? So, like uh, you, let's say, by the end of the every cycle, right? You think that you kind of, I mean, either uh, unit of action or the player who enacts this unit of action through the character, they think that they figured everything out, and put everything to order, but then something happens that kind of resets everything, and they need to start from scratch, right? Or from, like, maybe not from scratch, but you know. So that would be something that, uh, let's say, roguelike games will use a lot, right? And all roguelike modes in games will use a lot, because at some point uh, uh, there will be, you know, the end of the session, right? And the end of the session will lead to the uh, 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 to, to the loss of uh, uh, something, right? Some things, like maybe loot, maybe achievement points or skills or something, uh, uh, will remain, but like the majority of stuff that was generated during the session will vanish, right? So that could be also, that could be the pressure on the system, right? Then, yeah, let's leave it at that. So uh, the point here is that without pressure, or like in Lord of the Rings, for example, right? If you don't solve the ring question, then again, uh, it's not as, uh, like, the zombie apocalypse is a very, how would you call it? It's very biological kind of disaster, right? It's very, uh, yeah, it's emotional, but again, like, it's very, like, the humans turn into non-humans. It's very kind of left hemisphere type of disaster. And in Lord of the Rings, uh, everything will be forever enslaved by the darkest possible creature uh, other than his previous boss in the universe, right? And that's kind of a little bit different level of catastrophe, right? So here's you have your personal catastrophe of, let's say, turning into like very intimate catastrophe of zombie apocalypse, and there you have like very uh, more emotionally and spiritually charged catastrophe that kind of that is hard to even scale, you know. Again, catastrophic things work very well as a pressure on the system, right? Or lack of resources, right? You can do whatever you want, but you have, you know, whatever, 3 lives, 9 lives as a cat, right? And but again, something happening, right? In order to consume those limited resources, something needs to happen that is unstoppable and unavoidable, right? So that every time, like that's the hardest thing people encounter during the design of the architecture of the universe, because there are different levels of abstraction. The author, like the creator of the universe, tends to kind of imply their personal understanding of what is catastrophic and what is not, and it's not always kind of obvious for everyone, even in the group, not in the entire world, that this is the, you know, the right level of catastrophe, or people go too broad, like, you know, like very broad, uh, not very well described danger of general hazard to everything, right? Which brings us to the last point for today, which is called believability. Believability, other than there's a cool word to, you know, to say, believability, it is it's a kind of a, it's a test for everything that you did during the first 4 stages, right? Because when you come up with the unit of action, the type of interaction, the place of interaction, and the pressure on this system, then you need to make a step back and to ask yourself a question: does this make sense? I mean, like, because you're one of your biggest and most dangerous enemies is subconscious disbelief, right? Because like a lot of people who are either lazy or for various other reasons, they tend to, or maybe because they didn't want to do any kind of world building, they just wanted to develop a mechanic that will let the cat jump over the dog, you know, and that's it. And somebody told them that they need immersive, believable world, and they never wanted to do that. And then people do some lazy things, you know, that could be described as, you know, this and that happens in my universe because of reasons, because I just said so, right? And that's something that, you know, in very rare occasions, it could be a very lucky mistake or, you know, case of just luck, right? That somebody tossed a coin and it just so happened that everybody likes that, right? But that's kind of, it's not strategic, right? You can't count on that. what you normally want to do, you want to ask yourself a question, right? So for as again, let's use the previous examples. If you have units of action, like in the fighting movie, like the blood sport, right? Let's say you have, again, I remind you that the units of action are not the fighters and not the characters of the movie. Units of action are different martial arts styles. That's important. Then type of interaction between those units of action is obviously fighting, right? And place of interaction, depending on what type of franchise you're talking about, will be either the single place where everything takes place, single place where everything happens, right? Or it could be multiple places where your units of action will interact with each other over and over and over again. And the pressure for that will be that, okay, in a fighting example, in fighting movie example, the pressure will be that there can be only one, right? It's too many of you, right? Only one can be the best of the best of the best. And the time is ticking, right? And given the, now, when it comes to believability, this makes a lot of sense for many different reasons, right? Because you can imagine that, because you immediately, even though the units of action are not humans, but the martial arts styles, you still kind of associate them with humans because you know that people who are into martial arts, they are competitive and how would you call it, like passionate in terms of like, it's still competitive, right? Okay, so they're competitive and disagreeable, and sometimes they could be, then they might have all kinds of. So when somebody tells you that, hey, here's the different types of martial arts, like different styles of martial arts that interact in a form. First of all, different styles of martial arts makes sense for you, right? You're like, yeah, okay, I know that there are martial arts and there could be different styles of those, right? Okay. And then they tell you that, okay, and they interact in the form of a fight. And you're like, yeah, that makes sense, right? Because otherwise it will be, you know, uh, if they will immediately, like if for some reason, the type of interaction will be the discussion club, you'll be like, what the, like maybe it could be a comedy, right? Or something like weird, but you immediately feel that it's unexpected in a bad way, right? Because you were like, yeah, fighting, yeah, that makes sense. They will fight, yeah, that makes sense. If they don't fight and do something else, that's strange. That brings this subconscious disbelief that kind of destroys everything, and you are not interested already, right? Doesn't matter what people will tell you next. As soon as you got this that subconscious disbelief, it's pretty much over, unless you have, let's say, doesn't matter for now. So, and then the place of interaction also needs to make place, because someone tells that it's these styles of martial arts that interact in a form of fight makes sense, and the place is either like arena, like the single arena, or multiple arenas with beautiful or strange or symbolic decorations. You're like, yeah, makes sense, and also it is cool, right? And then when someone says that there's the pressure, and the pressure is that there could be only one of them who is the best of the best of the best, and the time is ticking and it needs to be solved in a week, that also makes sense for you, because you know that these people are competitive and they each one of them want to kind of immediately prove that they are better than everyone else, and that makes a lot of sense because otherwise if it would be a movie or a game, whatever, a world described about like the world where you have what, I don't know, change the unit of action and everything falls apart, right? So if it's some kind of a, I don't know, not not every unit of action will associate with competition and the natural urge to prove that they are the best, right? For example, if it will be if the unit of action will be the nurse, right? Then the whole system will fall apart because like no one will believe that the prime motivation of the nurse is to prove that she's better than the other nurse, right? Because like the overall kind of perception of the profession is that it is about caring, like and sacrificing self for the sake of others, and you know you will immediately uh, hit that subconscious disbelief, right? So that's the architecture. You define the unit of action, which is not necessary because normally what you see, you will ask people to kind of follow this framework, especially if they're already doing something, and they will say, yeah, my unit of action is this, and that character, and the types of interaction is like, you know, they can pick up the items from the ground or kind of use the whatever in-game mail or kind of do quests together. That's not that, right? So the unit of action is the, again, it's not character, it's not necessarily human, right? It's two or sometimes more entities that interact with each other to generate the basically what ultimately leads to excitement of the audience, right? For which it is made, right? So that's the unit of action. Then the type of interaction, again, can't be everything in the world. It needs to be narrowed down to very specific types of interaction that are relevant for your unit of action. It makes sense, right? That these units of action will interact in such a manner, right? Or, yeah, let's leave it there. It should make sense. Because every time, why I am kind of thinking about it, there's always a place for kind of being super special and creative and controversial and you know, doing everything like, you know, against the rules and things like that. And I'm not against that. I mean, like that's cool. But in order to be against something, you need first to master something that you want to be against of, right? So again, different crazy stuff may happen over the course of developing of even the architecture of your universe, and of course further down the line with setting, genre, and cross media potential. But we are talking about like the basics and you know, the rules that you want to understand and learn to use, so that then you could kind of play with them, right, more freely, right? Place of interaction, again, place of interaction that makes sense. Like every next step should make sense. You should check to all of the previous steps that you make, right? So place of interaction makes sense as a place where the units of action engage into interactions. The pressure should make sense, that it's like relevant and, you know, really makes units of action either it either affects the intensity of interaction, right? Uh, Normally, yeah, it will do that. Normally, it will affect the intensity of interactions, right? So because of the pressure, you will either not slow down or accelerate the intensity of interactions, right? And then the believability. The whole thing, like the whole architecture, should be believable, right? If you use analogies, because it's all about analogies and abstractions, right? This architecture thing, because all the examples that we had is like there's zero humans in examples that we made, right? It's like the human motivations, it's like styles of martial arts. Uh, Again, like in Lord of the Rings, the unit of action would be something that you may call an unbearable thing, right? How about that? Right? Because, and not necessarily bad, unbearable thing. It could be in like the unit of action of the whole world of Tolkien is unbearable thing and the human, right? And it could be so good that it is unbearable, and it could be enormously bad and it is unbearable. And then the whole interaction is like either what the human, if you think like the hobbits are also humans in this regard, right? Like creatures, sentient creatures, right? uh, and the whole, you know, types of interaction would be between sentient creatures in these unbearable things, and the goal will be that the sentient creature should figure out how to bear this unbearable thing, either alone or with the help of others, right? And not necessarily in obvious ways, because the critical feature also, but it's already a kind of again story for the next module, is that normally unbearable things are very hard to figure out, right, and to deal with them because they are unbearable. So yeah, normally your unit of action will be something which is not human. I mean, like not the character, right? Um, and it's a very abstract place. And in order to check yourself that you didn't go too far with abstractions and analogies, you need this last point of believability check. Uh, you can do it yourself. You can do it with people, you know, like just the people that you know, preferably people who are into something. I mean, like not don't. It doesn't make any sense to take some normie and ask them about the dark fantasy universe that you're developing or whatever, right? So will not work very well. So, I mean, other than that, consult with anyone who is capable of understanding what you are talking to them, right? For And not in a way like do they like it or not, but in a way like does it make sense? Is it believable, right? That these things may happen with these actors, right? With uh, in the system under this type of pressure, right? Yeah. So That's about architecture of your fictional world or universe, if you like. And that's enough for today. It's been already 2 hours without 10 minutes. Um, Next time we'll move from architecture to setting and talk about um, how you pick up a setting and how you do it as a strategic move, as a strategic choice, right? Because when you finish your architecture, you will have a very nice model, right? Like the abstract model, right? Yeah, and it doesn't have any aesthetic or ethical, maybe, but like it doesn't have any aesthetical features, right? And you need to understand then, you need to ask yourself and to think very well, which setting will be beneficial for this abstract model that you came up with, right? Because again, getting back to Game of Thrones, could be anything, right? It doesn't have to be fantasy, other than dragons, right? Because if you remove dragons from Game of Thrones, which is weird thing to say, but anyway, it's a fantasy, it's a military political type of thing. It's zombie apocalypse, right? You can easily imagine Game of Thrones in 21st century, right? Like a couple of lines about temporal anomaly, and then here you have dragons in New York or whatever, right? So the reason why you choose setting is because, and in oftentimes you will have a choice, right? But then you need to understand the critical features of the setting, right? Because again, you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you are like, okay, I will do fantasy, but as we said previously, I will skip the elves, or orcs for that matter. And that's, I mean, like again, it's cool to be special, but and we will talk about it in greater detail next time. Um, you have to understand that people, your audience, right, for whom you do this, they are being trained by decades of entertainment industry producing very specific and very successful products in the same category, in the same setting that you are about to choose, right? And what you want, and again, it's not about um, it's not about trying to be like everyone, right? It's not about that, because like especially young people, they kind of want, yeah, no, I will have everything special. If something happened in some other product, there will be no place for that in my product, right? That's kind of the normal thing for especially young kids. I've been dealing with young developers and students of game development faculties for a long time. That's kind of the normal thing. You don't want to be like that, right? Even though it's cool to be very special. What you want to be, and you don't want to be a follower, right? Or kind of copy paste, copycat, whatever. What you want to do, you for your world and for your product later, you want to have everything that every best product has in this category. And I'm not meaning copying, write the exact stuff. But if 99% of fantasy, successful blockbuster level fantasy, has dragons, then for fuck's sake, you need to have a dragon. Then it's that's point number one. You need to have things that are repeatedly used in successful products or universes of your category. That's point number one. But then, after having all that, you need to introduce innovation together with that, right? So, for example, you have dragons everywhere in the fantasy, and you don't like it for some reason, right? Or whatever. Could be a valid point. I mean, like if you personally don't like something and you want to change it, but you would want to base innovation on something that you learned that your target audience is lacking or would love to have in this category, but still uh, um, no one provided that, right? So that would be the good definition of innovation, right? I mean, again, we can talk about art, we can talk about being super special and all that, but in terms of building the commercial entertainment product with wide appeal and adoption potential, it is important that you kind of like if you're doing sci-fi, you need to have beam weapons, right? It's and starships or whatever, like technology and robots. Then you decide in what form and how you kind of land it on your architecture, right? But again, we're it's a topic for the next module, right? The idea for today is that think of architecture as backend and setting as a front end. Both are super important. It's not the conversation about like setting is not important or later the storytelling. Everything is important, but everything needs to be done at the right place at the right time and to solve its purpose, serve its purpose, right? The purpose of architecture is uh, it's the foundation, it's the mechanism that will evoke the most powerful and meaningful emotions from your audience, right? Because setting is cool, like it will have like visualization and everything, and characters and all that. That's very, very, very important. But the ground level, it's the architecture is the answer why people love football, right? Go try answer that question. And the setting will be like the color of the ball, the uniform, and like the logos of different football clubs and like the stadiums and all that, right? Uh, that would be the setting. So you need to figure out the architecture. Next time I'll talk about the setting. And yeah, for those of you who are in our community in the group, feel free to ask any questions because I can imagine this topic could be kind of hard to digest. And for those of you who signed up for World Builders program, expect an assignment. Again, I will drop it in our group within the next 24 hours. Okay. Thanks for watching. Cheers. See you next time.